Hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adam. I'm Head of Marketing here, and I'd like to welcome you to this ISM webinar. I know you'll get plenty of practical advice from today's session, which you can start applying to your own roles straight away. This webinar, once delivered, will be made available on demand as soon as we finish, so you can watch it as many times as you like and at your own convenience. During the webinar, you'll be able to ask any questions you like by typing them into the boxes to the right. We'll ask any questions you have at the end. Please also take a few minutes of your time to have a look through the attachments that Phil has gratefully supplied. And now to obviously introduce our presenter. So Phil is a B2B sales professional with more than 30 years as a frontline salesman, sales manager, and director. He now focuses on using his experience to help other sales professionals develop their skills so they can obtain, maintain, and develop high-quality businesses. After a lot of hard work and preparation, in 2018, his company was selected as the UK's only platinum partner for the Sales Extra Professional Sales Development Programme. He also uses a host of new business approaches, and one of the most applicable in today's market is obviously the sales letter. I'll pass over to Phil now. He'll be the next voice you hear. Thank you again, Phil, for taking the time, and over to you.
Thanks, Adam, and good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully this will work this afternoon, because it didn't this morning. So thanks for the introduction, Adam, and let's get straight on to talking about how to write an effective sales letter. So as you're aware, sales letters, they offer a fast, simple and effective way to attract new customers and generate new business opportunities. But as you'll be aware, unfortunately about 95% of everything that marketers and salespeople do goes in the bin. And probably only about 2% of those that eventually do read it take some action. So increasing any of those numbers can make a massive difference. So a quick example, if we send out 10,000 emails and we get a 5% read rate and 2% of action, then we've got 10 transactions or purchases that we've gone through. But if it can increase either the rate of reading or the rate of taking action by even 1% each, then you can see a significant increase just by doing some work up front to make the sales letter and sales emails more effective. So what are we going to cover today? Well, there's 4 different areas we want to touch. One is how to capture and retain attention, how to say the right thing at the right time, turning needs into desires, and then get more reading time. So if somebody opens it, then they read more of it and get to the end and take some action. One of the things that Adam did mention is the attachments. There is a quick win checklist template which has got all the various bits you need to be able to complete to go through and come up with a sales letter model. And there is also a republication of the original blog post, which has got all the words, all the examples that we're going to cover in this presentation. So if you download both of those, you should have enough to create your own fantastic sales letters. So let's move forward. So it doesn't matter whether your business is B2B or B2C, your audience is made up of very busy people. And unfortunately, they're not sitting around waiting for your sales proposition to arrive in their mailbox or inbox. They have dozens of things on their mind, and unfortunately, you're not one of them. So the first thing you need to do is get their attention. And the best way to capture and hold your audience's attention is to talk about something that interests them. And the one thing in which we're all interested in is ourselves. So we have to start by talking about the customer rather than us. It can seem a bit counterintuitive because when you sit down to write to prospects, the natural inclination is to begin by introducing yourself and your organization and then go on to offer and explain what you offer, how long you've been in business and who your best customers are. This is exactly what many salespeople do, and it's a fatal mistake. Your prospects don't start off interested in you. They may become interested in you, but only once they understand what you can do for them. All customers care about one thing more than anything else is themselves. So any attempt to explain what your business is must begin with them. You have to talk about their problems, their situations, their needs, their hopes and their desires. In other words, you don't write to your customers, you write about them. And that's what customer centricity in copywriting is all about. So if we look at a quick example of how not to do it, I'm writing to introduce my company, Global Services, and explain our range of services. Now that can be translated into something which is far more customer focused and is addressing them personally. Another example, which is probably more typical and a bit more wordy, is this example on the screen here, where we're taking a bit more time to introduce ourselves and probably pushing the customer even further away than when we started. And a simple way to rewrite that would be far more, it's almost conversational actually, in terms of the style, but it's far more about what's in it for them and what could be in it for them, and far more engaging from a customer. They can actually see themselves how they might actually work with us, as opposed to just being talked to. An example here is, and you will see this much better in the notes that accompany this. So you can see there the card that could save you money is at the top right, and the card to take on your travels down at the bottom. So they're all about what the customer can do, and far more engaging. But first things first, the contents of your sales letter or email will be centered on two key topics: your credibility and credentials, and the virtue and value of what you offer. Credibility and credentials refers to any copy that talks about you and your organization, such as your capabilities, experience, resources, accreditations, awards, customers, etc. Whereas virtue and value refers to any copy that talks about your products or services, such as what they do and how they do it, why they're better, how they deliver greater value, higher quality, and improved functionality. Virtue and value tells customers how your offering will save them time, effort, or money. And it's critically important that you talk about these two topics in the right order. You should always begin your copy with virtue and value. That's because, as we discussed in the other slides, your prospects don't start off interested in you. Therefore, you should begin by explaining exactly what you can do for your customer. If that appeals to them, then they can see value in what you offer. They will ask, who are these people? That's the point, and the only point at which they will become interested in reading about your credibility and credentials. When your copy leads with virtue and value, you have a high chance of capturing your prospect's attention and interest. But when your copy leads with credibility and credentials, it's doomed to failure. So here's an example of an email which gets it wrong by leading with credibility and credentials. So let's talk about me rather than let's talk about you. And actually that email could be improved significantly just by swapping the first two paragraphs over. So then we're capturing the attention, and then we can talk about ourselves. So, emotion. There's two ways to advance a sales proposition to your target customers. One is to use rational explanations that set out a logical business case or compelling promise of value. The second is to use emotional drivers that make people feel good about something, want to do something, or want to have something. Which do you feel works best? It doesn't matter whether you're in the automotive business, retail business, IT business, or finance. When you're a salesperson, you're in the people business. And all people, whatever their industry, job title, or demographic, make decisions emotionally rather than rationally. Most copywriters understand that they need to get more emotion into their writing, but very few know how best to do it. One easy solution is to incorporate emotional states within your writing. Emotional states are simply the things we all feel. These include feeling proud, confident, in control, excited, content, frustrated, disappointed. You know, the list is huge. So when you write about your customer's current situation, concerns, challenges, objectives, etc., you should make sure you include at least one or two emotional states within your copy. You could talk about how frustrated their workers feel when they don't have the right tools to a good job. You could talk about how embarrassing it is when you make a bad decision that wastes money. And talk about how delighted your customers will be when they get a more responsive and satisfying level of service. Imagine how proud you'll feel when you reach your prospects' hearts as well as their minds. One easy way to get emotional states into your copy is to use a device called internal representation. This means inviting your target prospects to picture themselves in a situation. You can do this by using phrases such as imagine, consider, or suppose. Or you could pose a question. What if? Have you ever? How would you feel? When was the last time? When you invite your audience to picture themselves in a situation, you invoke an emotional state. As a result, they literally feel what it's like to be in that situation. The most persuasive copy maintains a balance between both rational and emotional drivers. But if you have to choose one over the other, choose emotion. Because as Donald Corner, the neurologist and author, explained, reason leads to conclusion, emotion leads to action. Now you can see in this letter from the World Skills Show how emotion is captured on the first first headlines. So they're using emotional states and visual language to bring the copy to life and encourage the audience to feel, not just think. Notice also how this particular letter uses reader centricity. Both start with the word you and beginning talking about the recipient's world before going on to the moving proposition that it got. This is how reader centricity, internal representation, emotional states, and good structure combine to create attention-demanding and persuasive copy. The final area is what we call fixing points. So, as you're aware, reading requires a lot of cognitive effort. We don't notice how much of an effort it is because most of us are highly competent readers. However, we are all presented with far more reading content than we have time to consume. Things like adverts in newspapers, on the bus, on the tube, endless web banners, social media content, and of course, sales letters and emails. So when we're presented with unsolicited content, our default position is to ignore it unless it interests us. And we can't do it the other way around because there's just too much time required, too much content to consume. So the problem is, how can you tell which content is worth reading without actually reading it to find out? The answer is we take an informed guess. And to inform our guesswork, we use something called fixing points. And fixing points are a core element of eye track management, a process that uses an eye movement recorder to map and measure how people read. And by analysing eye movements, we can actually predict and control how people read and absorb what we write. A fixing point is any piece of printed or online content that our eyes rest upon momentarily to gather information. The eyes rest upon each fixing point for about 0.2 of a second. And as we read, we combine all the information we gather from various fixing points to form a snapshot understanding of what we're looking at. We then decide whether to stay or go, read or discard. The process takes just 5 seconds, and in that time your work will live or die. So let's examine what your readers will see in those 5 fleeting seconds that they look at your sales email or letter. The reading process comprises of 3 sequential stages: glance, scan and read. And it starts with glance. The reader picks up a few key words in the headlines, reads the subheadings, looks at the logo and takes in any images or graphics. Then they decide stay or go. If they find no interest in what they've glanced at, or if they fail to find any meaning or value from what they've seen, they'll go and unfortunately you've lost them. However, if they respond positive to what they see, a glimmer of interest or potential, they stay. And if they stay, they'll then go back and grab more information. And when this happens, your work is promoted to a scan. At the second stage, the scan, they'll read the whole headline, the subheadlines, a few fragments of copy. They'll read the captions to images, any text that appears in a box, and they'll read the PS, if you've included one. Then they'll decide stay or go. And if their interest has waned or they can't find enough value, they'll give up. However, if they like what they'll see, they'll stay. They'll go back for a more detailed look. And when this happens, your work is promoted to the third stage, the read. Now they'll read your sales letter or email until they either lose interest or respond to your proposition. Used properly, fixing points can flick the reader's attention from I'm not going to read this unless it interests me, and to I'm going to read this until it disinterests me. In other words, you've got them hooked. You've got them reading, and now they're yours to lose. Now, there is a practical limit to how many fixing points you can use. The maximum tolerance for the reader is 10. Let's say 10 on an A4 page, PC or laptop screen. And that's a maximum, not a target. For some sales letters and emails, as few as 4 or 5 might be enough to get the core proposition across. But once you go above 10 fixing points, your sales letter or email appears too busy. There's too many elements fighting for the reader's attention. So they don't decide what to look at to gather the information. They just get overloaded. Busy is just too bad, so please don't overdo it. So you can see a good example here from Alliance and Leicester, where there's a number of fixing points. So you can see the propositions clearly and easily. Your eyes go straight to them. The headline's easy to read. There's something there about £5, which is the first thing I'm going to look at. So they've got my attention quickly, and I can do a quick scan. Similarly, the example from Help the Aged. Again, we've got not many fixing points. There's a Help the Aged I can see as a fixing point. I've got the text on the right-hand side, today in the UK, which is an easy scan read. And I've got Lila's skin peeled away after a scalding bath, which again is a fixing point, very quick, very easy to read. So I can know within a couple of seconds, yeah, that's something I want to proceed with, and then I'll read the body text. Okay, those are the 4 areas I wanted to cover, but the last part is the checklist. And the checklists really are just to make sure you've got the 10 ways to improve the level of engagement and response to your sales letters and emails. And I would add there that it's also applicable to things like your LinkedIn profile or any other formal writing that you're doing, even on a website, to make the content customer-centric as opposed to all about yourselves. So quick through the checklist. As I say, these are all detailed in the handouts. So create a subject line that sets the topic and selects the audience. And try to do it within 28 characters or less with spaces. And the idea of the 28 characters is it means it will fit nicely on smartphones and will actually display in the subject line. And just do a quick test to your own smartphone to check that works. Write a strong headline. All sales letters and emails, once they're open, need a headline. Make it reader-centric and try to capture the whole proposition in the headline. And don't worry about being clever or creative. In direct marketing, direct headlines work best. Make sure the opening sentence talks to the customer about the customer. Lead with virtue and value first, and credibility and credentials last. Make sure you talk more about the customer than you talk about you and your organization. Count how many times you say I, our, and we. Then count how many times you say you, your, and your. And make sure there's far more you, your, and yours. Don't talk about what your products are. Talk about what they do for the customer. And use emotional states and internal representation to connect with the audience and create personal relevance and desire. Use fixing points. We've seen those in the examples of headings, subheadings, text boxes, graphics, and a PS. But keep it to a maximum of 10 on an A4 sheet, unless if it's going to be a smaller document. And surprisingly, use a PS. 80% of people who read an offline letter will read the PS before they read the body copy. Therefore, the PS cannot refer to something you've said in the copy. It must make sense to those who have not yet read the copy. So write your PS like a complete value statement or an offer linked to a call to action. Include an imperative to respond now. This could be offer closes in 14 days, while stocks last, first 50 inquiry, or orders only. Don't miss out or incentive, free gift, or other fulfillment device. And if you're sending an email, test and refine, test again. Thank you very much. I see there are...
there's a couple of questions that have come in.
Yeah. There are, yes.
Okay, so I'll read them out to you and then you can... what if you just have 300 accounts, i.e. 900 contacts? I'm assuming that was in relation to the first
in a database?
Yeah.
Well, in terms of quantity, that doesn't really matter. If you've got those contacts and you want to write to them, then it doesn't matter whether you've got 900 or 9,000. I think the only area where it matters for numbers is if you want to do any what they call A/B testing. So we write an email of or a letter of one specific style, and then we might change the header on another one and test them. If there's only a small number of accounts, and probably 300 is sort of getting to the lower end of that. If you're sending out two different types and trying to measure the open rates, the numbers are actually significantly statistically too small to actually make a valid comparison. So that would be the only. So if there's anything that you want to add to that question, then please do. But in terms of quantity, it shouldn't make any difference. It's still about increasing the conversion rates.
Okay. Here's a question that I think everyone can, including me. What about approaching people over LinkedIn? How big should the email be? I'm assuming the first message.
Then pretty short, really. I mean, I'm doing a lot of work at the moment on LinkedIn, and my introduction is about about 2 sentences, which is, "Hi, this is Phil. You're in my area. It might make sense for us to get together." So I'm not selling over LinkedIn. I'm trying to make contact, and it's really the first part of a relationship on LinkedIn, as opposed to trying to capture somebody.
And then the last question I think was in reference to that letter you got from that insurance company, referring that letter about colours.
Colours, blue, not red. I'm assuming. I'm just going to put that in front of my face so I can see it. So, I mean, those are the colours of the building societies. So they're using their company colours, but you can certainly see that the reds are being used there to stand out. So there's one there which is 0%, and special offer to get you started. So those are the two things in red which do pop out on the page. So yeah, they're using red there to stand out, and blue is there's just normal corporate colours.
They use that with medicines as well. The green is the positive, the blue is the positive, red and all that is usually
the different emotional states.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think so I think some people will do that, but more often people will keep it to a corporate style.
Okay.
So like the World Skills is in their colours, the Help the Aged, it's all in their corporate colours. So the focal point on the right hand side, there's some bars above it which is the orange company colour, and the text is in their purple company colour.
Okay.
So that gives a consistency of brand.
I can see another question's coming in, just from my admin side of things. Can you?
Oh yeah. What's your biggest, earliest mistake?
Wow. Who asked that?
You want the truth? Well, my biggest earliest mistake was actually
on this topic rather than just.
Well, I'm assuming so. Yes. Yes. Well, this is before I knew anything actually, and I sent a letter. So there was a group of us in the sales team, and there was probably 5 of us, all with a lot of experience. And I wrote a letter there saying how there must have been a couple of 100 years worth of experience, and how if you went back to this certain king in history, we had all the time from then to now, we had that experience. It was a dreadful idea that I really tried to force into a letter and then send out. As you can imagine, it did nothing. So that's certainly my biggest mistake, and it's never been repeated.
Fantastic.
So, well, I think simple works well.
Agreed. Well, with 24 minutes gone, with 5 minutes remaining, I'd like to take this opportunity to obviously remind everyone to download the attachments that Phil has gratefully sort of supplied for us. Also, a little bit of a shout out to our supporters, Just Williams, who I just got an Instagram post on saying that they are watching the webinar, which was really cool to see. And hopefully Phil will be back. Phil, thank you very much for taking the time today.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, everybody.
And I look forward to seeing you all on the next webinar. Thanks very much, everyone. Take care.